Oh, RebelCon's been fantastic. I think that, while we're in classes with the guys most of the time during the week, one of the things we're able to do here is we're actually able to interact with them. And well, once you get to meet somebody in person, talk with them in person, the communication bandwidth increases. So this has been great. The people that I've met that are also trading, that I'm also in the Rebel pit with, and we are exchanging text messages back and forth, the camaraderie is just excellent. So I recommend anytime they have an in-person event, you got to come and attend.
Join us this December in Miami, Florida for Market Rebellion Live.
Oh,
bang.
Bang indeed.
Bang. Hey, we got a whole bunch of bang, by the way, Pete. Your AMD from a week ago banged like crazy. That thing just boom to the upside, and it's still going. And maybe somebody had an inkling that some guy that goes by some title like the Oracle of what is it, Pete? Of Lincoln? Is it the Oracle of St. Louis? Is the Oracle of Omaha? That's it.
Omaha.
Omaha.
He's a huge fan, John, as you know, of Peyton Manning. Omaha.
I was going to say Peyton Manning. Omaha. Omaha. Folks, welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I'm John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian. The voice that you might hear floating in the ether is Jared, our producer. And we welcome you to the almost zero macro zone, because I don't know how you can make money on macro, folks. Really, I really don't know how. But we give you 1 minute of macro just to make sure that you guys are aware of what the world is responding to. And today, Pete, it's October producer price, which, they want to say it declined. Yeah, it declined from the previous month, but it's still up 8%. 8% annually. That's a big number, Pete. It's not exactly like, oh, it's crashing and inflation's not a problem.
John, it's like a football team that's been getting beat by like 60 points a game and they only lose by 40. Jesus, that wasn't so bad after all.
They're just doing fabulous. What about this, Pete? I'll throw this in there too. Credit card debt up 15%. So in other words, households are increasing debt like crazy right now. And they are because they have to pay more for everything, Pete.
Yeah. Mortgages, credit cards. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that, John? Let's see. There was something called the financial crisis. But anyway, no, I don't think there's any problem at all. I mean, what the hell? Just let them borrow whatever they want, John. It doesn't really matter because,
never been a problem.
3%,
Yeah, it's never been a problem in the past, Pete.
Unreal.
Well, let's dive into Taiwan Semiconductor, Pete, because it's only trading. Oh, let me see. I'll do a quick thing here, Pete. It's 81.71. It's up 12.5%, 34 million shares versus 12 million average. And we're halfway through the day. And it seems to all go back to Warren Buffett.
Well, you know what? All you do need is a guy like Buffett. Although, John, these things already started last week. So maybe there was a little bit of leaking going on because we had paper in Micron. We had it in Marvell. We had it in AMD. We had it in NVDA. I mean, across the board, SMH, John, they had buying there as well. So what in the hell? Somebody figured out something, but now all of a sudden we find out, well, it looks like the old man in Omaha finally decides to say, all right, well, here's what we decided to do. We got 60 million shares of this daggone thing. What do you think of that, guys?
Yep. It's a pretty nice, it looks good on paper, Pete. Yeah. He was buying it, folks, on its back. All of those stocks really were on their back in the quarter. Now, like Pete said, for the last week and a little more, they've been buying those stocks. Micron, Qualcomm, all of these stocks, Pete, AMD, Taiwan Semi, all flying. So I think the Buffett trade is a pretty smart trade I would still stick with longs in there, but I would roll up so that I take money off the table for profits I've already got and roll up to a higher strike so that I can still participate.
John, those AMD options were absolutely insane. And that was, I believe it was on a Wednesday last week. And by Friday, they'd gone from 70 cents to $6. So gives you a little bit of an idea of what kind of movement. And all they've done is continue to go to the upside. So keep an eye on these semiconductors. I'm not sure they're done running.
Yep, I would be right there with you, Pete. All right, second stock. What about NU? NU. This is a company based in Brazil. It's digital banking, Pete. In other words, online banking. And they had a much larger than expected flood of people onto the online platform. They said, quote, sustained increase in the number of active customers and higher customer engagement. Wow. Shares are up over 20% of NU. And it just seems like they just love this one and want to keep buying it, Pete.
Well, they had a huge jump, John, when you look at what happened with their net income. That was a negative number just a year ago in this same quarter, and all of a sudden you come up with a positive number. So nice big move. It's always good to see something like this on a move to the upside like what they're doing right now. They talked about engagement. They talked about just about everything looked like it was working in the right direction at this point in time, John. We'll see if that persists, but for right now, they have definitely been right. And this stock is making a heck of a move today, 20% or more higher.
Yep. And keep in mind, folks, that we weren't the only ones with an election. Whether or not they agree with Lula or Bolsonaro down there in Brazil, the fact that you've got an election behind you, even if they still have protests and things, means that a stock like this is one I want to hold on to, Pete, for longer than just a one-day trade. Yeah. All right. What about C Limited? SE is the symbol here, Pete. These guys had a bigger quarterly loss than had been estimated, and yet shares are screaming to the upside. How do you plug that into your brain, Pete?
I plugged that into my brain by saying, you know what? Is there a potential for a short squeeze? Yeah, I suppose something like that going on, John. I'm not really sure, because when you look at those numbers, you just kind of got to scratch your head, right? I mean, these guys have their losses are swelling, but there is some online growth going on there, John, too. So at some point, I guess folks are just looking at this saying, you know what? I know the cash burn is high, but we think that this is a company that can come out of this and maybe start to take advantage of the fact that the growth is there, and they've just got to figure out how do they make money with it, because right now they're in a definite struggle, but maybe the folks are just figuring, you know what, maybe things are starting to turn the corner. I would not be touching this one right now, John.
No. And folks, Pete and I always look at where did a stock come from, because as he said many times, a 50% drop in a stock means that if you get a 50% rally, you're not back to break even, because that 50% is based on where the stock was after the fall. This one was $355, Pete, and it traded all the way down into the 30s, I believe. Let me see, 52-week low, $40.67. So the fact that it's made a big comeback today, a 41% jump, bang, more power to you. We had unusual activity, by the way, Pete. Yesterday in this name, ahead of earnings, they were buying the 48 calls with the stock at 46.5. How do you think they did now that the stock's at $65?
Yeah, $17 in the money, not so bad. Whatever that was paid, John, that is a nice win. That's one you want to take away. By the way, a cash burn of $2 billion. So keep an eye on that name. They might not be going up for very long. If you were in those options, please take them off. You got to be somebody who's got a little bit of discipline, because look at that growth. Holy smokes.
Yep. And lastly, Pete, another stock that Warren Buffett was buying the heck out of, even though our mutual friend, Jim Lebenthal, loved it a lot higher. And that's not to rip on Jim. That's not my purpose here. No. But Jim did love Paramount, P-A-R-A, a lot higher than where it is. But it has come down dramatically. And then Warren Buffett says, you know what? That thing might be a takeover. It might not be around much longer than me.
Well, there's a lot of things about this stock, John, and it's definitely had a tough time. That's probably the nicest way to say it. But
Yeah.
Buffett decided to jump in this name as well. He's looking at a name, John, that he thinks has some promise after the selling. Like you said, a lot higher. Now it's come back significantly. And Buffett suddenly decides, you know what? I'm going to grab a quick 91 million shares of this stock. And then maybe even some of the talk out there, John, of is it a takeover? I'm not so sure. This whole thing is coming in at a very interesting time. A large short in the stock too, John. I think you always want to know what that looks like. And I try to tell people all the time because that can work to your advantage at times when there is a bit of a squeeze, and maybe there's a little bit of a squeeze going on as well. So the combination of Warren, a little bit of a squeeze, maybe this thing's got a little bit of room.
Yep. And I would point out, Pete, that he's been building his stake. This isn't the first stake, but the stock was a $39 stock. It traded down to 15 recently, and now it's back to 20. So it's still only half of where it was. So if you're somebody that bought it earlier and it ran to 39 and you didn't do anything about it, you're not one of those people that's cheering unless you bought it a lot lower than where it is right now.
Right.
All right. Remember, folks, we do have Miami. Still got a couple tickets left. Miami, December 8th through the 10th. Just go to marketrebellion.com/Miami. That's marketrebellion.com/Miami. We're coming up on Black Friday. You guys could buy this as a present for somebody, whether it's your wife, grandson, your husband, whatever. You could buy this as a present, and they'll be buying you bigger presents in the future because they'll be traders. They'll know how to manage risk. They won't be like Sam Bankman-Fried's girlfriend, Caroline.
Oh, God.
Which, by the way, check out my Twitter account because we're up over 16,000 views on that one of Caroline Ellison, Pete. Sam Bankman-Fried's girlfriend sometimes, I guess. And at other times, she was the CEO of Alameda Research. She had so much experience. She'd been a trader for all of 18 months, Pete, when he put her in charge of $10 billion. What could go wrong?
Yeah, the qualifications were definitely not there, John. I mean, let's be honest. There was so much going on in that story. We learn a little bit more every single day, and it just seems to get worse and worse. But yeah, the experience level was definitely not there for the girlfriend.
Well, I'm going to give you my unusual today, Pete, which is going to be Luminar Technologies. Its symbol is LAZR. And many of you are thinking, well, what do these guys do? Well, software for passenger and commercial vehicles, basically. So LAZR, they came in, they bought a lot, Pete, of these December 9 calls. So these aren't regular December expiration, because if Pete or I say regular December expiration, that would be the third Friday in December. These are the very first Friday in December, which is December 2nd. So I want to make that clear. These aren't the ones that expire several weeks into the future. These are only out there basically 2 weeks into the future, Pete, not a whole expiration into the future. But they bought 50,000 of these, which is 5 million share equivalent of the at the money call. If they buy that much of an at the money call, Pete, somebody's putting down a big bet that they've got some really good news coming their way. I want a coattail on that, so I'm in these calls.
I can't say I blame you. I saw that trade, John. That is a name that does come up frequently with very large trades, a lot like ChargePoint and some of those names were just kind of consistently there. And this one, you had that roll that they were rolling up. So that's always a good thing. Somebody who made money and wants to be in the trade, you'll like to be there. Qualcomm is mine, John. This one's pretty interesting as well, because we just got done talking about Warren Buffett. We just got talking about what's going on with the semiconductor world, and we see a lot of flows in there, and a lot of them have been right, and we're just continuing to see this sort of a theme play out. 14,000 of the November 131 calls, John. The stock was trading about 127.50, something north of 127. Those calls were going from anywhere from 78 cents to about 96 cents. Very interesting to see this, because we've seen all the other names hitting every single day for the last, probably call it 8 to 10 days at least. But this is just another one to add to it. Qualcomm, I like seeing this kind of option paper, John. The stock's a 112 to a 93 sort of a range over the last bit. And because of that, with it down here at 127, you're on the lower end. It's gotten off of the lows, but it's on the lower end. So I think there is a little bit more room to the upside. I like seeing these calls, and today stock up about 4 or 5%. So it's having a pretty decent day as well.
Absolutely. And like Pete said, Buffett in here buying in the semi space, that's enough to get you really interested. And he was buying the ADRs, American Depository Receipts, for Taiwan Semi. But, the companies that do benefit, Micron, Qualcomm, AMD, watch all of those because I think they go higher, Pete. Yeah. All right. Tell me what your pick is, Pete, for the NFL coach of the first half of the year, because I've got an idea in my mind, but you, with your sports background and your sports talk radio show, the Sports Huddle, every Sunday from 11 to 1 Eastern time, 10 to noon Central time, the Sports Huddle. You guys talk about stuff like this on that show. Tell us what you think would be the reason that your coach should be the coach of the year.
Well, he's a friend of ours, John, which is a big hint. It's a guy who's got two. It's Ron Rivera. How about those Washington Commanders, John? I have not seen anything like this, because if you go back to September and August, and all you've got to do is go through some of the news stories, what are people saying? Well, the Commanders sure are terrible. They're going to be one of the worst teams in all of football. And who's their quarterback? Carson Wentz. He's not very good. He's over the hill, too many injuries, all this kind of thing. And then who's his backup? Well, the interesting thing happened, John. Turns out that these guys are actually pretty good. Turns out that Ron Rivera is actually not such a bad coach. And John, at this moment, halfway through the season, give or take, we're looking at a team that's 5-5. Now, that doesn't sound great, but what if I read off the teams who have a worse record? Green Bay, Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta, Arizona, Rams, Denver, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Houston, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. All of those teams have a worse record than the Washington Commanders. So give that a little bit of thought. And then where the people thought the Commanders would be, they were basically looking at them, John, as one of the worst 2 or 3 teams, maybe battling for the first pick in the NFL draft in 2023. But that's not the case. And if they weren't in the most, in my opinion, probably the best division in football, the NFC East, they'd be at the top of just about everybody else, John. Meanwhile, last night, well, all they did is go up against the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. I love them. You love them. We love what's been going on up there. Quarterback's been fantastic. They've had some great receivers that have played really well. Defense is just off the charts. Well, the Commanders went up there and got the job done. They won that football game, and it was going away by the time it was over. It was just a great game. It was great to see them, and they stepped up to the plate. So I think you probably agree with me, but you tell me, what do you think about Ron Rivera now?
Well, Pete, first of all, great guy. He's been fighting some health issues, and he's still getting the job done. I can't say enough nice things about Ron. He was our brother Paul's roommate at the University of California, Berkeley. A fantastic human being and a great football coach. I mean, the guy should have been getting head coaching job offers a long time before he did, I thought, Pete, because he did such a fabulous job, but nobody wanted to hire him even for a coordinator because they were afraid that this guy was pretty damn smart. Now, while I agree with your pick, I'm going to throw out the rookie coach of the year, which is, of course, Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings. Because all this guy did, Pete, was come from, the Rams, where he's the O coordinator, where he's the guy behind that big offense with Cooper Kupp and everything else, Matthew Stafford, and he turned them into a Super Bowl champ. More than any other place, they have Darnold and all that stuff. But I think, the fact that they could score, Pete, and score consistently was a big deal. Now you've got him going to the Vikings. They're not picked to do anything all that great. And all they are now is tied for the best record in football. Yeah. So I agree with your pick for Ron, but I would say that this guy's nipping at their heels. And he has this offense for the Vikings firing on all cylinders. And I think the players react to him. They love that he's a young guy too. And, so he's the rookie coach of the year for sure. And he could end up being the coach of the year, depending how the next half of the season plays out.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you at all, John. I think that's a great call. I think the only thing that I see that bothers me about the Vikings right now is the lack of defense, because it's not necessarily injuries. They've got starters everywhere. I mean, they've got the two best defensive ends. They've got great linebackers, allegedly. They're too small, in my opinion. They've got an okay secondary, but it's getting a little bit older. But on offense, and that's what Kevin O'Connell is, he has them clicking, John. And he's got a guy, Kirk Cousins, who happens to be one of the better looking quarterbacks in the fourth quarter of any quarterback in football right now. But let's go to this one. How about this one for number 2, John?
All right.
MVP this year, and I think the race is pretty interesting, but everybody will say, well, Patrick Mahomes. It's got to be Patrick Mahomes. The guy is absolutely fantastic, and they'd be right. He does everything right. You look at his numbers. He's fun to watch. He does those crazy throws, John, the sideways throws and everything else. He also does run with the ball, although he's not he doesn't want to be a runner, but he can run with the football. He can make things happen. He makes Travis Kelce even better than anybody else probably would be doing. But that being said, how about a guy down there at the Miami Dolphins named Tua? I mean, John, all this
I knew you were going to go there.
His QBR, John, is 82.6. Now, the quarterback rating system is interesting. There's a lot of things that factor into it, but he's number 1. He's ahead of Patrick Mahomes there. He's ahead of everybody else. I mean, it's pretty impressive, because how many people at the start of the season thought, well, yeah, they got Tyreek Hill, but, it's all these, there's a lot of buts out there. Well, they don't have, the coach isn't really ready. He's not qualified, all that kind of stuff. Well, Tua, John, he's got 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now, if you go up and you look at the top quarterbacks, 3 interceptions, that's pretty amazing, because he is looking like a champ there as well. He's got the number 1 passer rating as well. They're 7-1 when he's the starter. So when you look at all the different numbers as they add up, John, you look at Tua and you go, what's not to like about this guy? He's got great receivers. He does a great job spreading the ball around to those receivers. I love Pat Mahomes, but if Pat Mahomes gets hurt, I think somebody can step in and do a decent enough job to keep them winning and get them at least into the playoffs. I think this guy's the most valuable player to his team of any player in football right now. I think it's Tua or bust. And if Tua's healthy, these guys have a shot.
Well, don't disagree. I am going to throw out there, Pete, the guy who had a difficult night last night, and that's Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Just because I think that kid can play ball. I think the team coalesces around him. So just to your point, like Tua, he makes the team better, even if he doesn't play up to, the exceptional level that he usually plays at, because they just love the kid. Same thing about Josh Allen, obviously. Now, Josh, to your point, has that elbow injury now. And we'll see. Hopefully he comes out of that and, they get him the proper amount of rest and he comes out and his arm's as strong as ever, because he is a rocket-armed quarterback.
Yep.
I sent you, Pete, that thing about how he came out of Fresno, sent 1,000 letters to all these teams that he wanted to go play for in college. And only Wyoming said, okay, come on out. And all he did was just rip that league up and come out as the number 1 pick for the Buffalo Bills. And he's earned all of those accolades. But as far as the season this year, up until last night, I think Jalen Hurts, Pete, is the guy to watch right behind Tua and Patrick Mahomes.
And it comes down to a lot of the time when you look at these quarterbacks, John, Josh's biggest struggle this year is he's just throwing interceptions. He didn't do that last year. Last year, he was just on fire. It seemed like every single week. But this year, he's throwing some interceptions. As a matter of fact, last night, Jalen Hurts and those guys, they had 4 turnovers, John. And here's the interesting thing. Another reason why I kind of like what Ron Rivera, Chico, as we call him, is, one of the things that makes him so great, he's got 4 linebackers that are on an injured reserve right now, John. How about that? And Chase Young has not played a down yet this year, although he's healthy, and I think he's playing this week. But he's missing a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And meanwhile, all they've done is get themselves into a position to maybe make a run. They're at the bottom right now in the NFC East. We all know that. But at 5-5, John, they got a shot to maybe move up over the next 7 weeks. It's going to be interesting.
Yep. Season's basically halfway done. Now it gets exciting, Pete, because rivalries are always great. But when you get down to the games that really count, where your record is on the line, like you say, 5-5, you can certainly catch up a couple games just by catching a hot streak. And if beating the Philadelphia Eagles doesn't do it for you, I don't know what would, Pete.
Right. Yeah, undefeated.
Well, make sure you tune in. We'll be back. Remember, we've added Wednesdays, so we'll be back tomorrow with the Rebels Edge. I'll be back with 3 at 3 later this afternoon. Please tell a friend or two about the show. Remember, over 1,000 new subscribers for free every week have been joining us on YouTube. We appreciate all of you for that, folks. We'll see you tomorrow from John and Pete. Bang.
Bang.